Thank you. This is the Measure X Citizens Oversight Committee. This is the makeup meeting from last month where we failed to reach a quorum. We do have a quorum today, so thank you all for being on time. Appreciate that very much. So I'll call the meeting to order at 2 o'clock and ask for a roll call of those present, please. Go ahead.
League of Women Voters, Representative Janet Brennan, alternate Howard Fosler,
Present.
Salinas Valley Taxpayers Association.
Here.
I'm Raleigh.
Yeah.
Here.
Oh, Salinas Valley Taxpayers Association.
Here. That's Kevin.
Senior or Disabled Services Agency, John McPherson.
Here.
We have Bicycling Advocate Victoria Beach online.
Here on Zoom.
Transit Users Representative Maria Vera. Here. Chamber of Commerce, Monterey Peninsula, Monica Lau. Here. Alternate Brad Levang.
Here as well.
Habitat Preservation, Dale Agron. Hospitality, Gary Curcio.
Here.
Agriculture Representative Norm Group.
Here.
Alternate Paul Ludo.
Here.
Education Representative Darren Fort.
Here.
South County Representative Paula Getzelman. Here. And we have Carol Kenyon on Zoom.
Here.
Latina Organization, we have Diane Jimenez. Here. North County Representative Ed Mitchell.
Here.
Bicycling Representative Robin Lee. Here. And Construction Representative Keith Severson.
Here.
Okay, Chair, we have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you for doing that. And now we'll move on the agenda to public comments. Any member of the public may address the board on any item not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of this committee. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes. So if anyone would like to make public comment, now would be the time. Any hands raised? Not seeing any, so I close public comment and we will move on to the next agenda item. That is the consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent, which is to approve the draft minutes of the August 20th meeting. Receive the 2025 Measure X Citizens Oversight Committee meeting schedule. And then finally, receive the call for nominations for the 23rd Annual Transportation Excellence Awards to honor individuals, businesses, groups, and projects for their efforts to improve the transportation system in our county. Anyone want to pull anything on the consent agenda? Any comments?
Yes, correction to the minutes.
Okay, we'll take a correction to the minutes.
Maria, make note for the change of the minutes.
On the attendance schedule that's included in the minutes from the draft August 20th minutes under my name, Norm Group. I'm listed twice as unexcused absence. Those should be changed to excused absences. The 2 letter A items.
Okay. And then if I can just make a pitch for the Excellence Awards, if you know of anybody in our community that has done a project or program that enhances our efforts in providing cohesive transportation use for our community, please nominate them for the Excellence Awards. It's a real simple 1-page nomination form. You can do it online. The deadline is December 5th. And so I would encourage you to get those and submit them to us. And then we will be recognizing them. Those nominations will go to the executive committee in January. And then we will be recognizing them after January for their efforts. So think of somebody in the community. A lot of times it might be neighborhood groups that are doing something amazing that we may not have heard about. So if you know of individuals like that, or if you know of a public servant who has gone above and beyond the scope of their job to make a difference, this is an opportunity to recognize them. So I just want to put it there.
All right, thank you for that plug. And
So
so
I have a technical correction to the minutes.
okay,
I see here number 7 announces Greg, your last name spelled wrong yet again. It's Hamer. And also the word consider is after there, which should be deleted.
Okay. 7. Yes, okay, I see that. Okay. So noted. Any other items on the consent agenda? All right, with that, I will accept a motion to accept the consent agenda with the modifications to 3.1, the minutes.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
So that was Rowley and Getzelman as, yes, right? And is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Thank you. Not seeing any or hearing any, I will call for the motion, a vote on the motion, excuse me. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.
I'm staying, I wasn't present.
One extension, Robin Lee in the far corner and Monica Lau in the far corner. Extension and Gary Curcio. So did you get that, Maria?
Gary Curcio, Monica Lau, and Robin Lee.
Yes, thank you. All right, moving on in the agenda, we'll move to item number 4, which is receive, update, and provide feedback on proposed revisions to the Measure X annual reporting process. And I will turn it over to Yannicka to make the presentation for us. Thank you. You might introduce yourself also, since I
Yes.
think you presented to the
I
community.
will. Let me just make sure this works. Okay, I think you'll be. I can moving with that for me. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yannicka Strauss. I'm an associate transportation planner with the Transportation Agency for Monterey County. And today's presentation is a follow-up item to an item that we presented at the August meeting. And so if this works now. Go ahead, yeah. So we'll start off with just a little bit of background of the item that I will talk about. And then we will look at some examples of, I guess I should give a little bit of background to start with. So the item that we are talking about today is an update to what this audit subcommittee produces as their annual report that gets included in the TAMC's annual report. And so what we'll be doing is we'll look at what other agencies do for their sales tax measure audit reports. And then we can have a discussion about what this committee wants to do. So I actually have some print off of some slides that are included that I'll reference as we move forward. So next slide. So just some background, earlier this year, I think it was actually in the spring, members of this committee requested more information about the detailed financials that we include in the TAMC annual report. And so we put together some updates to the financial charts and brought those back in August. There were more comments and requests from this committee to just improve transparency and provide more detail. And so today what we will be proposing is that the audit subcommittee can produce a standalone Measure X annual report separate from the TAMC annual report that will provide all of the information that this committee would like to include. The problem we were running into is when we included in our agency annual report, it was too long and we print the annual report, and so that would be a significant added cost, but we do want to include all of this committee's information. And so we think one way to do that is by creating a digital version with a link and a QR code. So there'll still be a summary of information in our TAMC's annual report, but a more detailed report can be online. So next slide. So this is the first page of the handout that I sent you, that I just passed out. So Santa Barbara County Association of Governments, for their sales tax measure, Measure A annual report, this is an outline. So they included a letter from the executive director and chair of Citizens Oversight Committee, which is similar to what we include in our annual report. Then they have overview infographics, which we will review. Then they have a feature story of how the projects leveraged funds. And then there are project profiles. There's a summary of the role of the oversight committee, and then there's a fiscal profile, which is up here on the screen. And because this is very small, it's in the report. You can look, the printed report that you can look at. And so this fiscal profile has revenues for the fiscal year in question, in addition to the cumulative since the measure was passed. And then expenditures for each, for the program of funds. And then total expenditures, and then the remaining fund balance. And one thing to note for our newer committee members is that oftentimes cities will hold on to funds so that they can spend on a larger project in future years. So next slide is a sample of an infographic that was included in the Santa Barbara report. And so there's a total funding, there's projected funding through the end of the sales tax measure. And then there's an amount of funding that was leveraged using the sales tax measure funds. So this is just a way to sort of paint to the community, to the public, the total funds available to our county and to the projects in our county. Next slide. So the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission, the outline on the left is what they include in their Measure D annual report. And this PowerPoint is included online, and the link that the report is linked at the bottom of this outline. So they include an executive summary with revenues and expenditures chart. They have an overview of the sales tax measure. They have a summary of audit findings. They have a revenues and expenditures summary. They have infographics, project highlights, and a section on carryover balances. Next slide. So this is a sample infographic that they included in their report. This is the annual revenues and expenditures for each year. And this is, like I said, what I'm showing you are examples of what we may want to include in our annual report. So next slide. Another infographic, this is a comparison of expenditures. So this is each city, how much funding goes to each city and each project that's implemented by either the RTC or Metros, the transit agency, or any of the regional projects. So next slide. So this is a sample outline that we've put together, open for discussion. This is the audit subcommittee's annual report. So we're really looking for, staff will provide any support that you guys need, but we really are looking to you to give us input on this. And so what we're proposing is an executive summary similar to what we already include, an overview of Measure X and what it means to be in compliance, a summary compliance chart, which is what we talked about in August. We sort of called it the wall chart. Infographics, we don't currently have many infographics for Measure X in our annual report, so adding some infographics, and then having a section on how funds have been leveraged and maybe in project spotlight. We can give a local example and a regional example, and then provide a fiscal profile, and then a section on carryover balances and projects that we may be looking forward to. Next slide.
Oh, gosh.
So these charts are also included in the packet that I sent around. These are the charts that we presented in August. And so this is the summary or upgraded wall chart that we talked about. So the green means that the jurisdiction is in full compliance. Red means the jurisdiction did not submit the required documentation by the December 31st deadline, and so Measure X disbursements are being withheld. And then yellow means the jurisdiction did not submit the required documentation by December 31st, but subsequently submitted the documentation, and so disbursements were reinstated. So that next chart. Slide, please. Thank you. Again, very small. I don't expect you to see the numbers on here. That's why I printed it out. This chart shows jurisdictions' revenues, the carryovers, expenditures, and then whether the maintenance of effort was met. So this puts all of the cities on one chart with more detailed financial information than what we normally provide. And then the next slide. So these are the regional projects that are included in Measure X, and is essentially a balance sheet. So this includes the revenues, distributions, regional program expenditures, carryover, and remaining balance. Next slide. So some examples of infographics we can include are a pie chart of the spending summary, a bar graph of project types so that residents know where we're spending our money, and then a double bar graph of revenues and expenditures over time is another option. And I think this is my last slide. So, we really tried to be responsive with the feedback that we received from this committee and present to you some ideas of what the audit subcommittee would like to do. But again, this is your report. So we'd like to open up for questions and discussion about what you all would like to include in the report.
All right, thank you very much. I'll open it up to the committee members for questions or comments.
Yes,
Go ahead, Kevin.
thank you. I pulled up our bylaws here, and it notes here, the ordinance Measure X that was passed requires annual performance and financial audits by TAMC and participating jurisdictions, as well as citizen oversight to assure the public that the revenue raised is properly used. And it says further on under this section, the purpose of the Oversight Committee is to be an additional layer of transparency so that the public is assured that TAMC, the County of Monterey, and the participating cities are operating consistent with the terms of the ordinance. I think that for the chart, the elaboration on what the terms mean and what it means to not comply is important. The question I would ask this committee is, if we're going to get into more basic fiscal reporting, such as how the money is spent, how it changes over time, I actually like that, but I'm wondering, shouldn't that be in the main annual report with us? We're focusing on making sure that the participants are operating consistent with the terms of the ordinance. In other words, some of this stuff that's suggested to add to our report, I think that should be in the main TAMC annual report under the authority and jurisdiction of the appointed board.
I second that.
All right. Any other comments?
Additional to those,
Sorry.
like beyond that, or are we finishing with that issue?
Okay.
Request.
I'm sorry, what are you asking?
Okay,
I can't hear you.
I have an add-on onto it. I'm with Kevin on this. First off, I recommend that, could you go back to the chart that shows excuse me, yes, next chart, back. Wait, keep going one more thing here. I would recommend that instead of doing an alphabetical layout, that a regional layout be laid. Because that way, we as a group, may not be as financially up to speed as the subcommittee, can more easily see how those areas are functioning. And I have a little example of that. That's a simple communication improvement. So that way, you can see the county monies, the valley monies, Salinas Valley, and then you can see the peninsula. Secondly, I believe the report should, from the subcommittee, be approved by this body before it is released to TAMC. That hasn't been done in the past. And for whatever reason, I'm not saying it's nefarious or anything, but that should happen, that we should be able to look at it. Additionally, when you get this chart, you see it's a lot easier to absorb the data on just what she talked about they were going to try and cover. What they received, what they spent, and what follow-on project is money reserved for. The reason I bring this up is because the supervisor from North County was having difficulty absorbing the information that was coming across. And I believe part of the story was missing part of the story of the very good work that this group has been doing and Hanson's been doing. And this little chart where you're looking for some graphics that help communicate quickly to the larger audience than those of us who are up to speed on this type of stuff, is simply A, what they got, B, what they spent on the streets and roads, C, what has been reserved for future projects. Additionally, that yellow, for getting that information, shouldn't be allowed. I'm not saying don't do audits. That's I agree with that. Okay, but the fact is, we can function and get to an annual report by them looking at and reporting what was left in their account at the end of the year. You don't have to have a big audit committee or audit professional. All you got to do is say, what did you receive the first of the year? What did you spend? Whatever's sitting there is reserved. What's the name of the project? Now, Soledad, I think it was last time we had Soledad, did a great job. They got a great project and they did exactly what I'm talking about. They received money, they spent some money, and they saved a bunch for the next project. But because we didn't have that piece in there, I think it's excellent that you guys are looking at talking about what's been reserved. This graphic helps communicate that like that. And that's what the public on the street, when a supervisor says, I didn't understand this report in the format that was used. I'm not saying take away the compliance portion. This is an addition, that little chart. When he says, I didn't understand this report before I was elected, and I still don't. If we can't grasp it, and if you left and right of me can't see the big picture real easily, we're not doing the second part of what Kevin said, the additional piece. It's not that things are going wrong. It's that we're not communicating as well as we could. So I make that motion that that type of chart be used, be required to be part of the report. It's not a lot of pages, add to the cost. And that way, I think the TAMC board reps will get a better report, easier to understand. And the public can see the doggone great work that's been going on. Like, I'll give you one example. Last year, not only did Monterey, the county section, Paula and my area that we stand for, not only did the county spend their full budget of X, they doubled it with other county money. Great story. Great story. And it's not a story, it's a fact. And so that's my motions. Has to be approved, use the format, cluster it by region, and make sure you have them give you the name of what the follow-on project is. Easy to do. I think Mike would agree that that's not too hard if we require them to give us that last amount category. 1 second.
I'll second it for discussion, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second, and I just want to be clear on what we're talking about here. So are you motioning that we replace what's on the screen here with something similar to what you just handed out?
No, not replaced. I think that chart, all that chart needs right there is just to be reordered instead of alphabetical.
Okay, that's okay, but you also have other things on this.
That
chart.
one little chart.
This would be in addition.
Yeah, that's just that chart. I mean, do you here's the test. Do you understand what that chart's trying to convey?
Which one?
The one that I passed out to you.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
I just have a
Go
quick
ahead.
clarifying question. So we did include a chart, and this is what we presented in August, and it's in the printed packet that does have all of the cities and the county, and it has the carryover balances and everything. So is there anything on that chart that we passed out to you that you would like to?
Is that this one?
Yes, that,
Okay, can you bring that one back up?
yes, the next slide. This one that you can't read, obviously, here. So other than it being made the other, so vertical instead of
And
horizontal,
regionally,
what was that?
and regionally sequenced.
Putting North County and South County separately.
Yeah, the county, North and South County is one area. Down the Salinas Valleys, that's Salinas, Gonzales, Soledad, Greenfield, King City, that's a regional like area.
Mhm.
And then there's everybody else in over by the peninsula.
Right.
And I believe that when you look at numbers falling out that way, it's clearer to,
Can I,
Yes, right.
I'm sorry, I see what you're saying, I get what you're saying, but if we're including this already, like, I hate to say it, but if the supervisor doesn't understand it, I think that's a supervisor problem, I don't think that's an us problem. I don't understand what's not understandable about this.
I can respond to that.
If I can jump in real quick, I think his concern is more like it's okay for us to understand it, but when we're putting it out for the community to see and look at, it doesn't. It's good that we have the information. As the board, we can coexist and actually align in it and agree that it's great information, but it's easier on the eye for someone who doesn't understand numbers and doesn't understand like the breakoff. So if you kind of put it in the sense that he's saying, it breaks it down to like make it easier for other people to read it.
No, I understand that, but I don't think this is, I mean, don't get me wrong, I get it, but I think it's redundant, and if anything, put a little pie chart in there for a city, say, hey, this is how much we got, this is how much we spent, this is what's left over, like more numbers and stuff. It's this exact same thing as this, in my opinion. I just think it's redundant. I don't think it's needed.
Let me respond. Let me
Of
respond.
course, please.
I brought this forward, the one meeting that Norm and Lee missed. I presented this type of idea to the people who were there. And there were members of this committee that said, oh, I didn't understand it. Okay, so for example, and no, I don't think it's an individual. I think it's a communication issue, and that this can be expanded a little bit. And you start looking at percentages of responsiveness. You see who's responsive and who isn't responsive. And I brought that forward. This is the simplest way of just getting you to see that the public, I like the consistency. They see the report that we have already, what I call the wall chart.
Yeah.
But when they want to see the numbers. Person on the street wants to see it. Supervisor wants to see it. It's not their problem. It's ever since I've been here, I've been saying, great story, needs a little improvement on presented. And so I don't think it would take a lot of work to reorganize the Excel spreadsheet by the regions, and you can start to get another feel that you can't get from the trees. You get to see that growth, pecans, pistachios, and watermelons.
I
Okay, so
understand what
there's
you're
more,
saying.
there's a means of getting a more understanding. I'm sorry, Paul. Paul.
I just wanted to say that I was having worked on this before, looking at what we accomplished, or what we did, and then looking at this regional. I understand where you're going from it as far as regional is concerned, but I know a lot of people are going to look at a specific place. They want to know where their area is, and they're going to a specific place. And I really do like alphabetical better. That's just my comment.
Well, and I believe you get both.
Oh, sorry, John.
So question, so I'm looking at two, and I have to admit, this both on print and up there is a little hard to read. So the question for this, what do you not see that's on this one, or do you think that this one
I've
has
been
stuff?
spending a year trying to get the last column, which was where was the unspent money went?
So project name,
Yeah, and to see if if you're a skeptical public person, which some people are, they want to make sure money's not being moved out of one project to be used someplace else. It's just it's a clarification that, no, it's in reserve for a downstream project. Now, if you put in more columns in that thing, you can start looking at other performance and percentages, which I'm not bringing to you and asking you to do that. But as a financial person who's worked $1 million projects, I like to look at the performance of my different department. And the one I brought last month is clear of that. So if the public can absorb that information, for example, our communication did not communicate at the last TAMC meeting that the county districts, not the two of us, follows in north and south. Not only did they spend 100%, they doubled. Lost in the weeds. Wasn't seen.
so just quick clarifying question on this one. It says funds reserved for upcoming projects, and on that one, it has remaining balance. Are those two the same
Same
thing?
thing.
Same
Same
thing,
thing.
Okay. All right.
same thing.
And if you look at our annual report, I like the linking, okay? You look at what was put out and published, you won't find that.
Quick question,
Yep.
on the labels. First of all, no, the A column, B column, then AB would mean to me A plus B.
A minus B. I think it says A minus B.
Well, that's not right either.
B should be.
What you received, what you spent, what left.
What
what's
did you
left
say,
to
there's
see.
also other money that goes into that, or?
No, I'm just saying, just the report, but Mike, what has come in the report previously said, this is what we sent you. They were supposed to reply, yes, we got it. This is what we spent. Did we spend it up to, there's a minimum requirement, MOE was required. Did they spend the MOE, yes or no? And it didn't address anything in the report about what wasn't spent, and it was hard to read.
My second question is this, how do you suggest this be listed alphabetically or numerically or just random?
I looked at it regionally and then alphabetically then within it. The valley one, I started at the north, went to the south, but I think you get two things there. You can alphabetically find yourself, and then you can see how you're dealing. Are you similarly performing well or not well as the other communities? So I'm saying, take the data you got, reformat it. It'll be more understandable in a smaller footprint. That should be understandable to the person on the street.
So on your chart, how do we recognize the measure of effort?
I did not include that.
Is there a reason why you didn't include it?
I wanted to go to the very,
I just want.
I support MOE.
Yeah.
By the way, there's 3 municipalities that don't have it.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, that-
Right? It's been what, 10 years? Okay, I know there's a reason why. I'm not
There's a
saying.
reason why.
So, I mean, from a management standpoint, when you start getting information like that, you go, I'll give you an example. We spent a lot of time on Sand City And their budget, you know how much it was? It's 3 decimal points out. It was 1/1000th of the budget for the measure of funds. Whereas 3 municipalities in the valley don't have an MOE. So you can get into some management insights. Yes, my original chart that I've been working with Mike on, it's been very helpful, was put the MOEs in there. And that's why people, when I showed it 6 months ago, they said, I had the full columns. And they went, well, I didn't know that. And that's why I tried to help the lady from the manager of Sand City. Just go, Jesus, let's get through this, get to an agreement, because it's so tiny minutia on the budget. And I'm saying people can't see the spread of the budget with the Excel spreadsheet. Yes, keep the link to it, leave it that way, but provide this chart with the MOE. Yes.
Oh, Paul, go ahead.
My question is, under each of the municipalities, you have project name. How do you deal with it if there's some or multiple projects?
Put it in there. But like Solid, they have their Main Street drag they were gonna do, but they hadn't started it yet. They're working on it, and they were saving money for it. And I asked the guy, making the presentation, because I knew the unused money wasn't being reported and had been reported in the past. And I asked him, so what happened? Where's the money coming from that project? Did you reserve some money for it? And he said, yes. Until that point in time, those monies not being recognized could have drifted off in some of the project. I'm not saying it did not. That report, fine, data's in there. Public doesn't see it. This works better. That's all. It's a formatting issue.
So
And a
I'm
communication.
with Paula. What happens if you get a municipality that has multiple or has none that they have specifically named, like Salinas? You put none.
I would write the 3 project names in there. It'd be fine. They can report that. Now, if they haven't done it, they haven't picked it, they're just holding it for reserve, they ought to tell you. Because what you don't want is some pessimistic, there are a lot of taxpayers that don't trust what's going on. And so when there's funds that aren't accounted for, that they can't find that are accounted for, they start thinking bad things, like it's being misused. It's not. This group is doing such a good job. I want us to come out and be seen in California. It's the one place when you open your mouth about taxes in that state, people like Tansy and Norm and supervisors, they spend it where they said they were going to do it. And in a lot of California, that's not true, including our neighboring San Benito County, putting people in jail because they're moving hundreds of thousands of dollars out of the county.
Norm,
Yes.
on our audits, are the audits divided by projects?
That I don't know the answer to myself. Is that, I don't think we divide by project, do we?
So I'm sorry, when we look at the compliance of the jurisdictions,
Right.
we look to make sure that the projects that the funds are spent on were eligible. So we do look at it from that perspective, but we don't necessarily.
But just the eligibility, but they're not, within the audit, it's not broken down by project in terms of funds spent.
No, it's not, because some jurisdictions, like county, like Salinas, spend on upwards of 20, 30 projects. It's quite robust, so.
So I can see where that could present a problem. If you've got one report that's talking about projects and the audits don't talk about project, where are you getting those numbers? Because aren't our numbers for the report coming from audits?
In general sense, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good question.
Yeah.
Okay, given a general form, but I'd say go with an asterisk in here, says 5 projects. 6 projects, it alerts people that are doing the audits that there's money stacked over here in five, I'm fine.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could, that would be fine, but I just was concerned about us trying to break out each municipality by projects. And they are broken out.
Yeah, I believe that the municipality has a responsibility to tell you that I have 5 projects that I've got the reserve fund for.
And then my other comment was on item B, where it says funds spent on streets and roads, I think. Funds spent and the dates. Date would be better, I don't see any point in streets and roads, when we know what they're being spent on. But I would like to see the dates in there that the funds were spent. I'm sure they'd all be the same, but nonetheless. And then instead of funds reserved for upcoming projects, how about just balance remaining? Because we're talking about funds, so if you've got funds received and funds spent, balance would be, to me, would be appropriate.
It'd be better than what we got. Yes, comes out, you like that?
I'd like to suggest something here. I agree with what you're doing here, which is we want to know if a city or the county is, I'll call it hoarding money without spending it in a timely manner. We want to make sure that when they get the money, they're either saving it for a specific project or they're spending it. There's a lot of ways that can be reflected. And I think we could spend many hours, I'm thinking about all the variables, such as, first of all, we're using this calendar year period, which may not match up how
Yeah,
things are actually.
Absolutely.
So my thinking is a motion like that, I think this has to go to a subcommittee for discussion.
I agree.
And here's what my motion would be, rather than adopting this chart, because I like Greg's idea. I think if you had a pie chart and, you had it in yellow, a section that says money not spent, and you saw a jurisdiction that had a big percentage of the pie chart that was in yellow, you would say, okay, that's the one we need to look into more. Either they're saving money or they're just letting it sit there, not serving the people. So here's what I would suggest here as a possible substitute motion. Direct the audit subcommittee to develop, prepare, and submit a report format to the full committee for consideration. And notice that goes back to the full committee. That provides visually understandable data to the public that would indicate success or failure of the local jurisdictions to make Measure X expenditures in a timely manner. Do you think that accurately summarizes what we're looking for here?
I think that's the most healthiest response that I've heard in a year. Yes, I think that's fair. You guys, there are maybe better ways to do it. I'm not the most brilliant guy in the room. And I fairly looking at it and hearing the message that there are people who have difficulty absorbing it. Not that it's wrong, it's just hard to absorb. Yeah, I think great. So I support that change in the motion.
Keep in mind, there may be people on the TMC board who say, that's our job, not your job as the oversight committee. But we could go ahead and do it and see what happens.
Our job.
Supports it too. We have a substitute motion, or this is the second accepting the substitute motion, okay? Well, if we don't have to do that. My
Email that.
question about clarification.
I'll email it.
Yeah.
Provided it's approved
You
here.
ain't got that?
My
Not that clear.
my question for clarification is when we say we're going to present a format, does that include the annual report and the separate report that we're talking about here that Yannicka just presented to us?
I don't know if we want to end up doing a chart like this, or if we want to do pie charts or some other way of visualizing. And we may even say, because of this idea that some local jurisdictions save money over a few year period, that may have to be reflected in some way. I don't know. That would probably be a lot of thought and discussion in the subcommittee.
Okay.
So I don't want to get too specific.
No,
but
I just want to make sure we're,
I believe that it is, I think Kevin and I are on the same wavelength, something a little bit more than what's been presented in the past, with some numbers in it, is a good way to go. Pie chart or something like this would be an improvement.
Let me just kind of weigh in for a second. So let's talk about timing,
yes,
because if we're gonna do this, like, we're meeting with the graphic designer to start working on the annual report on December 5th. So this committee will not meet again until February. We're gonna be ahead in that process to meet deadlines
Yeah.
in March.
Yep.
In order for this to be printed and published and mailed out. So if you were talking about establishing a subcommittee and meeting and coming to some conclusion, you're going to have to do that very quickly and meet outside of, this is the last meeting for the calendar year for this committee. So you'll have to determine when you're gonna meet, when you're gonna be able to meet all those deadlines in order for us to implement this upcoming year, 2025.
Right. So essentially, this has to come back to this committee in February for some sort of review and improvement,
Pretty much.
if the motion carries.
Robin has.
Who-
You have been waiting.
Oh, I'm sorry, Robin, you're off in the corner.
Face at the table.
To me, when you say you can't read this chart, that's a formatting issue, because even when it's printed out, I'm still not read it.
Can't hear you. Take your mask off, please.
No, when the presenter says you can't read this chart, there is a formatting problem. And I cannot read that chart when it's printed on a paper. We need to reverse the axis and make the font bigger and use pie charts that visually grabs your attention. So, oh yeah, like you were saying, yellow is funds not spent. So like you said, what's going on? But this is a problem. When you first said you can't read this, I went, hey, there's a formatting problem. So if you want people to be able to get the report, then don't use stuff like that where you can't read it. You have to have a magnifying lens. First off, who's going to do that? You can't scan it, you can't read it, you can't comprehend it. No wonder the supervisor can't get it because he's reading 50 reports a day and he can't grasp it because that's not graspable. There's such a word. So so it needs to be legible, easily comprehensible, and this is not. And there's a few charts like this that just don't get it. And you just can't get it right away. And that's kind of the way our system is sound bites. Think of it, sound bites, bits, then people pick up on it. People aren't reading this detailed or getting their magnifying lens out.
Okay, well, I think that is encompassed in the motion that Kevin made for us, is that the audit subcommittee would review all those formats and look at what's most readily recognizable when you're glancing at it or reading it, so.
Should I read the motion again for?
Sure.
Could I add one caution? If the final report from this body has no, I mean, here was the big flaw. There were not numbers showing up in last year's report. In fact, Mike has worked very hard being responsive. Hey, you're supposed to be reporting about the other 40% taboo. And we weren't. So being healthy about recognizing, hey, we need some numbers in here that we can absorb out of this baby and collapse them down to a pie chart or something like this chart. And being supported by other people, even on our own body. We've got to work at communicating and summarizing better. So it's got to be some numbers.
Okay, noted. So Kevin, do you want to read it again?
Yes. My motion is to direct the audit subcommittee to develop, prepare, and submit a report format to the full committee for consideration that provides visually understandable data to the public that would indicate success or failure of the local jurisdictions to measure X expenditures in a timely manner.
And
All right,
be
thank you.
compliant. Please. I totally support you on that. Compliantly.
In a timely and compliant manner. Got it.
All right, so before we vote on this, I'm going to take this out for public comment. Is there anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this? Anybody online? Please raise your hand. Not seeing any hands. I'm not seeing anyone in the room, so I'll close public comment on this item. And I guess we're ready for a vote. So
Can I ask one last question? This figure that we have here, this A minus B equals what we're talking about, is that the figure going to be the same on the county books as on the city books? What, first thing that comes up mind is fiscal year is very great deal. So what are we going to use, the county's figure or the city's figure?
I'm not sure I understand that because the cities are audited independently of the county. So
Right.
I'm
So
not
that figure
sure.
could be independent for each city.
Right, correct.
But it may not jive with what the county says. What, I'm just wondering how,
What would the county have to say about the cities? I don't understand that.
their figure may include or not include things that the cities does.
Separate.
The county doesn't. The county is independent in
It's-
their expenditures of what they do on Measure X.
Are they
Yes.
in parity?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
okay.
That's. Yeah, there's no crossover there, so I don't think we have to worry about that. All right. Now, let's call for the vote. All in favor of the motion, as Kevin read it, please say aye. Anybody opposed? All right, so we will decide on this constitution of the subcommittee later on our agenda, and then we should probably also at that point hope that we have to hasten those meetings in order to meet Teresa's February deadline, where she's gonna print the toast. We don't want that. Okay, moving on. Item 5 is receive training on the Brown Act, which sets the rules for the noticing and conduct of public meetings. This will be a really good informational item. And Teresa, are you introducing or should we go straight to Shane?
Let's go straight to Shane. He's our
All right.
council and
Shane is,
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shane Strong, and I am the agency counsel for the Transportation Agency for Monterey County. I'm also a deputy county counsel for the County of Monterey. This is actually part of a 3-part series where we're just going to be focusing on the Brown Act. And I just wanted to let you know it's the Ralph M. Brown Act. Does anybody know what the M stands for? How do I make this go? Does it go? Yeah, you can just click it for me once then, please.
Razor.
That's the man, the legend right there. That's who we're all talking about when we say the Brown Act. Do we have any guesses for him? Any guesses? Millhouse, so close, so close. Anyone? Milton, so close. Well done. Ralph Milton Brown. So there was a time in contemporarily 50s, 60s when they were kind of propagating all of these public agencies to public meetings laws, and it just happened that ours is called the Brown Act. So what is the Brown Act? It's an open meeting law to ensure that the people's business is not conducted behind closed doors. It requires us to do our business out in the open, that we have our dialogue, that we aren't shutting members of the public out. So really, these requirements attach themselves to legislative bodies such as yourself, but they give rights to members of the public who are not you necessarily. Next slide, please. Can we maybe move this bar over so we can see over a little bit and minimize there's. Okay, so the term of art that we use is legislative bodies. And legislative bodies it means any committees, commissions appointed by the board of supervisors, whether decision-making, advisory, temporary, or permanent. So here instead of board of supervisors, that would apply to the county, of course. This would be TAMC, right? So you report, you advise, and then they act, right? That's generally how the hierarchy works. So in that sense, you are, oh no, I've lost it. That was strange. I've not seen that happen before. But anyway, so you are the legislative body. These rules apply to you. Any questions on that? So, all right. Okay, these rules do not apply to staff or the public. Okay, that's a question that's going to probably come up when I start talking about the AB 2449 rules, everything else. Oh, well, what if Shane, as the legal counsel, he wants to appear through Zoom? Well, remember, the Brown Act applies to the legislative body. That's you, your cohort. It doesn't apply to me. It doesn't apply to members of the public generally. You may move on. Okay, penalties. It's good to start early on in the presentation with the why should I care, right? Why should I listen to you ramble on? Well, there's really two major things. On your left hand is that there's criminal liability. There's criminal liability for knowingly violating the Brown Act, You might be wondering, how can they prove knowingly? Kind of the easiest way to get defense on that is ask your legal counsel. That's normally the best way to shield yourself say, hey, I don't think this is right. Council, can you tell me if this is in violation of the Brown Act? Yes, it is. It is in violation. It's, okay, we're going to press. No, I think everybody needs to leave, right? We aren't going to knowingly violate the Brown Act. That's really the best way to do it. But how many times have I ever seen in my 10 years anyone prosecuted for Brown Act violation? Zero. It's very rare to be prosecuted. But you might have heard, and even in the news recently, not too long ago, some civil lawsuits, some civil actions. Anybody heard of any? Yeah. There was one in Greenfield not too long ago. And so what happens there typically is we void the action of the body. We'll void it. So if an appointment's made, an election of officers, I think is on today's agenda, for example, if there were a violation of the Brown Act today, somebody could sue and say, that never happened. That doesn't count. It's not the end of the world. We do our best and we're all human, whether you're a $10,000 organization or a multi-million-dollar organization, people make mistakes. We're going to err on the side of not making mistakes, but if we do, we can always correct it. So if you ever have any issues, any questions, let council know. That's what we're here to help with. Next slide, please. Any questions on that? Okay. Now this is very important. What is a meeting? A meeting under the Brown Act includes any congregation of a majority of members of a legislative body at the same time and place to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action upon any action or any item, that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body or the local agency to which it pertains. A meeting under the Brown Act does not include action. It simply can be an exchange of information. So what you said this is really important, and then you just read the slide to us. Well, what's the takeaway? This is very broadly defined. What's the quorum, Maria? Is it 11?
Yes.
11. If 11 of you are at Whole Foods, even if you're talking about the price of tomatoes, people are going to see you and they're going to say, that looks an awful lot like a quorum to me of that body. And they might say that you're up to no good, that you're cahooting. And that's kind of the easiest, that's like plain sight. But as you're going to learn, it's not just being in Whole Foods, it's also phone calls, it's also emails.
And texts.
And texts, very important. That's kind of like the cutting edge. If it were 6 years ago, I would say, we don't really know. We definitely know now. Texts, phone calls, emails, these all are ways of violating the Brown Act. But I think we're going to transition to the next page.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
You said ways, I'd say they're means of communicating. I've been told I can't communicate to anybody. That says the majority.
That's right. That's
So if I
right.
want to talk to somebody about like ask Paula, hey, I think I'm all screwed up on this, or I might be. Could you offer me some advice? I've been told I can't do that.
And that's right. And you have been advised, and you are noticing a distinction here. Does everybody follow what he's saying?
Mhm.
It's like the rule is not a majority, but they're saying not even one. That's just two. That's far from 11. And he's right. There's nothing wrong with that. Does everybody understand that? What the reason for that advice is because we can't control each other. We have to set a standard and say, hey, kind of deproliferate. We need to say, okay, we're not going to talk to each other except in open session, because you might talk to Alpha to Bravo, Bravo to Charlie without talking to Alpha, and then Charlie to Delta, Echo, Foxtrot, all the way till we hit 11. And I mean, it's like gossip in a small county, right? It can go pretty quick. And the only way that we can really tap down on that to control it is saying, please don't do that, please. Now, if you're going to do one or two, that's fine. But at some point, if everybody has kind of a squishy rule, like, just once or twice, we really can't control if there's going to be an exponent, if it's going to, does that make sense? So the advice is conservative, but you're not wrong in saying it's not 11 either.
I'm legally right.
That is
Legally right.
correct.
Because I happen to work hip to hip with Paula on some things because we're in this big group.
Right.
So I might call her once in a while or something. And so that's one person, and me being told I can't do it, I disagree, and I think that says I can do it.
Well, it's not just a rule just for you, it's for everybody to agree, right? And so, yeah, and that's really the concern, right? Because if You speak to Paula, and then Paula speaks to someone else and so on. We might go up into, well, what we're about to talk about, which is called a serial meeting. But yes, distinction well made. We can go to the next slide here.
Paula, don't call him.
And that'd be the only way to do it, right? You'd have to have some type of, okay, these are 3 types of meetings. Do we know the 3 types of meetings? You don't need me to read them to you, right? We have regular meetings, we have special meetings, which can be called typically by the chair or by a majority of the body. There's different timing requirements, and then our emergency, very limited, like nobody had seen it before the pandemic, but then it started happening more and more frequently. Please go on to the next slide. Okay, so whenever you're in a room with others, be careful. There are exceptions, like generally what I want you to take away from this exactly as we just demonstrated is to be cautious. If you see, even if it's 5 of you in a gathering together, you need to think, how is this going to be perceived by others? Even though we aren't technically a quorum, do I want somebody to snap a picture and say, oh, look, cahoots, the local newspaper? But if not a meeting, if it's not a meeting, it doesn't apply. And that just begs to the next slide, if you would please. Here are the exceptions. These are the types of gatherings on our left hand. And here is the answer, whether subject to the Brown Act on our right hand. So number 1, majority of commission attend annual conference of another organization. The meeting is not subject to the Brown Act. So if there's something like a national transportation agency and then a majority of you, 11, 12, 13 go, it's not technically part, right? Okay, provided you do not discuss business, please observe this caution, right? Majority of commission attends community meeting of another organization. The meeting is not subject to the Brown Act, but again, do not discuss, deliberate, or take action. Majority of commission attends social gatherings. It is not subject to the Brown Act, but be careful, again, discussion, deliberate, action. So with those 3, look, they're not technically meetings, but what am I saying to you? Appearances matter, right? We need to be cautious. We need to be careful, tread lightly. You are public servants, and the number 1 most valuable service that we can do is that we are being trustworthy, right? We're at an all-time low with people not trusting us. Please don't go out and create more of that sense of the public not being able to trust us. Retreats are subject to the Brown Act. Do we know what we mean by retreats?
Yes.
We're at the end of election season. We're going to be bringing in new people. Hey, let's all kind of get to know each other. We'll have some fun. Roast some marshmallows. Yeah, that retreat is going to be subject to the Brown Act. Individual member meets with constituents. This is not subject to the Brown Act, but can be a serial meeting. And as I promised, as we've been alluding to, start talking about serial meetings, which I already kind of touched on a bit. Okay, serial meetings are not allowed. Serial meetings occur when a majority of members have communicated about an issue and have developed a collective concurrence. A collective concurrence is developed when members have either directly or indirectly heard each other's opinion on a topic enough to collectively develop or begin to develop an agreement on an issue. So that's exactly what we were just talking about a moment ago, right? And so right now, the example is just Alpha and Bravo. That's 2 out of 11, right? So we have serial meetings. We have the daisy chain. A meeting of the Brown Act includes any congregation of the majority of the members of a legislative body at the same time and place to hear, discuss, and deliberate on the same matter. A meeting of the Brown Act does not have to include an action. So if we're just talking about it, we can create the situation. Alpha to Bravo, Bravo to Charlie, Charlie to Delta, and so on until we finally reach 11. Well, we haven't taken a vote. We're not even talking all at the same time. Once 11 people have talked about an issue, even separately, that would be enough to get us to the threshold. So right now we have to chain it Alpha to Bravo, no more, right? You're not going to talk to anybody. It's going to end. Okay.
Not my fault.
Not your fault. Yeah, that'll be it. But see, and that's right. And how do we control it? Well, I told them not to talk to anybody. But what if they do? We don't know. So, but that's a daisy chain, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. Okay. Let's go to the next one. The next one is bespoke. So we were just talking Alpha, Bravo, but what if Mr. Mitchell, What if Mr. Mitchell already talked to 9 other people? Right? What if he's already been talking to 9 of you and then he's the 10th and he goes, the majority. I'm gonna talk to Paula. That'll be the 11th. So it's not just one person talking. What if Shane actually, I've been a bad actor up here. I should use myself as the example here. What if Shane has been going to the individual members? And I have to be a legislative member, by the way, so just suspend belief for a moment. And I'm going to each of you and collecting your votes. I'm counting the tallies. And then finally, I deliver to that majority making number. That is still a violation. That's called the spoke. So there's the daisy chain, which seems manageable, right? Like as long as we can stop it. But the spoke is, what if somebody's already talked to other people? And so the reason why I just advise caution every time in these things is that it's hard to control communication. And only if we each agree to certain rules are we going to be able to absolutely and confidently tamp down. But if it's 1 or 2, yeah, you're right, the liability is low. But if everybody does 1 or 2 and we're all talking about it, if we're carrying on, 6 different conversations between 2 of you, hypothetically, that could really snowball quickly. We have less control. Okay, any questions on that? Go ahead.
So just to clarify, so
Yeah.
let's take, for example, the report that we just talked about.
Mhm.
Let's say there's 3 different conversations. One, it's 3, 3, and 5. If I got it. That's Brown Act.
It can be.
Right.
It's kind of a step closer to the Brown Act. As legal counsel, I'm gonna say, I'm not 100% sure I might be able to defend that. Right? Because if you were separately, if it's a majority, so was it 22 members of this body in total, 23? So if 23 and you all are compartmentalizing, I know that we're good. But then if I find out that, okay, we've got a group of 3 over here, a group of 3 over there, and a group of 5, at that point, we're getting closer. It might be there, but I think I could defend against it. But if the 3 and the 5 and the other 3 all just one person from any of those groups talk to each other, now they've linked. And that's why it's dangerous, because we can't really compartmentalize at that level. At that point, we need to tell people, get rid of your phone numbers, stop talking to each other. But obviously we can't do that. That's not realistic. But so the object of all this is really trying to pour this into the open body, like the formation of a committee. Brilliant idea. That's exactly what you should be doing when you're like, gosh, this is a really gritty issue. It's right for us to have conversations about it, but maybe we can't pick through it at the open. Let's do a committee. That's exactly the right step. All right, any more on this? Sir.
So Shane, I'm really confused now, because we don't have smoke-filled rooms anymore, but they still exist. And in Sacramento, at the time when the budgets are resolved, they all get together and they talk and talk and talk and talk. For days, they talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Why isn't that agendized? Why don't they require the public agenda to do that?
So I think the answer is this, and I don't, let me start by saying, I don't honestly know the question. It's never come up to me, but I used to represent a county, the largest county in Nebraska. And in Nebraska, our legislature, who wrote our public meetings law, they exempted themselves from it. Because why wouldn't you? Right? That's for everyone else. It's for us to tell you and not to do ourselves. So oftentimes, the people who write these laws do exempt themselves. I do not represent state entities, so I do not know. As a matter of fact, there might be a separate series of laws that requires this. However, budgeting for CAMC, budgeting for the county of Monterey, those are absolutely agendized and do fall under the Brown.
So are we gonna have to get a subcommittee agenda published before Kevin can have his meeting?
That depends. This is a good question. It sounds to me as though you're creating an ad hoc committee. Ad hoc committees are exempted from the Brown Act, provided number one, there's not a majority of the body on there. So whoever you decide has to be less than 11, right? So far, so good. It has to be temporary in nature, and obviously time being of the essence, you only have like a couple months. Good to go there. Third, you don't want, there can't be regular meetings, but you're going to exist in such a short time, that's probably not an issue. Finally, if all that's been observed, you don't have to agendize. But you can have more people than just members of the body, just to let you know, whoever the committee, the chairperson is going to be, you can invite staff, and that's actually a really good idea, right? Because you want to work with staff and say, hey, let's do it. Let's not just get this idea on our own. Maybe you come up with a really good idea that staff says, we can't possibly do that. You want to keep them in the loop. And you can also get people from other counties, maybe. That sounds like a big lift for a short time. Did I answer your question?
Sort of.
I like your honesty. What's your thought? Do you have a follow-up question, or is that?
I'm still not clear on how it applies to us. At what point do we have to put the notice on the board outside and in the newspapers?
So if we can go back 4 slides. So let's see if my counting is right. One more. No, one more. Okay, this is generally when it has to be done. So for a regular meeting, it has to be 72 hours in advance of your regular meeting. Okay, 72 hours in advance. That's inclusive of weekends. Special meetings is 24 hours in advance. They have to be posted. And then emergency meetings, you have to read the statute every time. It depends if the sky is falling or it's an earthquake. Like it's really malleable depending on the facts and what's actually happening on the ground. But these same things apply to the committees. So if you have an ad hoc committee that doesn't apply to it, but you have what's called a standing committee, it will. And it's my opinion that the committee you just formed is an ad hoc. So it will
It's
not.
actually a public meeting. It's a public committee. It's a standing committee.
It is a standing.
Yes.
How did you arrive at that?
It's been appointed every year for the last 5 years.
Oh, this is that does make it a standing
Yeah,
committee. I thought that you just created that tonight.
No, the TNC board approved, the audit chair, vice chair, and then an audit subcommittee. So
There you go. That answers that question. So,
Yes.
that gets us away from the exception, makes it a standing committee. If a board above you states that you're going to be a committee and it's a regular occurrence, that makes it a standing committee. So it will.
So if we gathered outside in the room before we come in here for a meeting and start chatting among ourselves about the things we're about to talk about, we got a problem.
If you were in this room and you failed to make quorum, but you're just talking about things that are going to be on the agenda, yes, that is also a problem. So you should not be talking about things that are on the agenda, but unless there's a quorum, is generally the rule. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it seems very unrealistic.
Well, that's what worries me so much about it. That's why I have these draconian rules to try to make sure that we don't get there. Because when we're lax about it, yeah, it's very easy to slip into a violation. And I've even been on the cell phone, the text message chains where they're like, hey, everybody, what do we feel about this? I'm like, nobody respond to that. I have gotten that, it's one of those things.
Yes, regarding the standing committee, it may actually be okay not having an agenda for it because I'm looking at the Brown Act, section 54952. It's defining legislative body, and it excludes standing committees of a legislative body under certain conditions. And then further on, it says the attends a majority of the members of the legislative body at a standing committee is an exception. So I think it might be worth looking into to determine if that standing committee is actually exempt from the Brown Act. Because I look at this, not that I'm a lawyer, and you may be exempt from it.
Send me an email. Let's get back to where we were, Maria, in the slides so we can try to knock this out as quickly as possible. Next one. All right. Email and text messages. They are vehicles to circumvent the Brown Act, and they should not be used as such. And that, like I said, like 6 years ago, we got that case. It was actually, I'm going to tell a story real quick. There was a legislative body and somebody was giving public comment and nobody was looking at the presenter. Everybody was on their phones. And then somebody would text something, look over, they get chuckle over here. And so the presenter's like, "Hey, what are you doing up there? Are you texting each other?" It's not public conversation, it's public comment. They really dismiss it. The guy asked, "I want to have your comments. I want to see if you were having a Brown Act violation while you're in a Brown Act meeting." Doesn't that sound wild? Supreme Court said, yeah, you violated the Brown Act. What are you doing? You're texting, talking about the presenters, how rude. Not even letting us in on the joke. So a majority of the board members of the local body they cannot email each other to develop a collective concurrence as to the action to be taken without a violation of the Brown Act. Even if the emails are made public, they would still be a violation of the act because the board would be depriving the public of the deliberative process. The term deliberative has been broadly construed. Means not only collective discussion, but the collective acquisition and exchange of facts. Can you believe that? Isn't that outrageous? You don't believe them, do you? We aren't saying exactly how we're going to vote. We're just talking about the way that we get the facts. That's enough. And it also applies to text messaging as well. Next slide. Oh, this is social media, probably not a big deal. This is kind of bigger organizations, but if you are on social media, the same logic applies. We tell the supervisors, don't like each other's comments on Facebook. Don't follow each other on X or whatever it's called. So just something to keep in mind. It can also be considered because you can do the same thing, right? A text message between 11 of you is the same thing as, 1 of you posting, "I will never vote for this," and then 10 of you saying like. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's social media for you. So with that, any questions? This is my email, by the way, if you have questions. Generally, it's probably best practice to give it to your chair and he'll pass it up to me, but I am ready to answer any questions you may have.
So I served on another public commission. And during public comment for items that were not on the agenda, the chair would always respond with a comment to those particular public comments. And I made an issue of saying it's not on the agenda, we shouldn't be commenting it.
Yeah.
And the attorney for that commission said, well, he's only making a comment, he's not asking for a vote. My feeling was that we shouldn't be commenting on items that are not on the agenda, right?
It's a very thin line.
Oh dear.
And you're going to get your lawyer answer, right? It depends. You're welcome. But it does depend. And so I want you all to understand the kind of driving force behind this, which is if it's not on the agenda, how is Shane going to know this is the day he needs to show up to speak? This is my issue. This is my issue. And it wasn't on the agenda, but then the chair heard something, then he spoke up. I feel the complete opposite. I've lived my life the complete opposite of that comment, and I wasn't there to speak to it. This flies in the face of the Brown Act. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Hey, if you're going to have a back and forth, you should agendize it. And that's why you'll hear legal counsel consistently say, gosh, let's not go down that road, guys. Let's put it on for the next agenda. So, but there are some comments that are sufficiently banal that it's okay to say. Something like, Mr. Strong, thank you so much for speaking to me. Mr. Strong, thank you so much. Can you please get in contact with staff? They have some things I think they want to explain to you. Mr. Strong, would you be available next month? We can put this on the agenda and maybe we can discuss this more robustly. So those are things that we understand, like we're getting into the substance, the merits of it. But hey, I do not want to be dismissive of you. I don't want to just be like, sorry, I can't say anything. We can have conversations through staff, or we can agendize it later on. But I wasn't there for the conversation you had with legal counsel, and I kind of see where they're coming from, but I just would have framed it a little bit more differently, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to comment on that, it's what I've always been told is it's a meeting in public. It's not a public meeting. And so if you start to have an interaction between people who are giving public comment, just exactly to the point, you have now basically started a public meeting about something that's not on the agenda.
Right.
And it's just a slippery slope.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Diane.
So would that apply equally to any one of us bringing up a topic that's not on the agenda and we kind of go rogue. Should the chair then stop with saying that's not on the agenda? Exactly what you said earlier, table it for them.
You know, this is actually a very good question and one that I struggle with myself, because very commonly, and I don't know if it's on your agenda, but on a lot of agendas, I'll see like report from committee member. And you'll just say whoever comes to mind. So that does worry me a little bit, but it depends how the conversation goes. And generally what I advise people is this: you're announcing to the body, hey, over the next month while we're away, these are some things that are tangentially related. Here are some meetings we're going to have. That's good. But if you were to say, hey, there's going to be an election next week and the bond is terrible and we need to fight against it, we need to do all hands, can we maybe table this till next section? It's an art, not a science at that point. That's why I also kind of advise bodies don't have that, because it's hard for me to judge if the person who's speaking is going to cross that threshold. And it's not really my judgment either. It's going to be a member of the public who finds out about it later and says, I can't believe that they did that they talked about this bond measure, this election, they didn't agendize it. That was grossly inappropriate. And at that point, the horse is out of the barn. Right? Does that make sense? Okay, cool.
All right, any other questions?
Go on horse.
Oh, and I guess I should ask for public comment.
As you will.
Any public
I
comment?
did have a comment, actually, I sent to Lisa an inquiry about whether or not the audit subcommittee is a standing committee subject to the Brown Act. Reading deeper into the language, I'm now thinking that it may be, but we consider that to be sufficient for an inquiry to make sure that we're complying with the law on that.
All right, we can do so.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you all for
All right,
everything you
thank
do.
Shane.
With that, I'm going to head out. So
Thank
All right,
you.
have a good day, y'all.
All right, that concludes item number 5, and I will have to say that that was the best Brown Act presentation I've seen in all my years of being on public committees. Okay, moving on. Item 6, call for nominations and elect a chair and vice chair of the Measure X Citizens Oversight Committee for a 2-year term beginning January 1. Sadly, you're all getting rid of me, so it's time for a new chair. So I will open it up to committee members to make nominations for chair and vice chair.
Could be representatives.
Oh, yes, and it has to be a primary delegate, cannot be an alternate. Sure. All right, Paula.
I'd like to nominate Kevin Dayton for chair. He's held a position before and he's very good at it, understands it. We'll move this right along.
All right.
Need
Thank
a
you.
second.
Kevin Dayton for chair.
Right there.
Any other nominations for chair? Yes, regular. All right.
Well, I'm honored and I'll accept that nomination, sure.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, and I guess we don't need to have a vote since it is a single nomination, so elected by default. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. And I think we're handing it off to some very experienced hands here, so I appreciate that. All right, then we need nominations for a vice chair for this committee. Any volunteer? Okay, Paula, we'll take you again.
I'd like to nominate John McPherson for vice chair.
All right, thank you, John.
I will accept.
Thank you. Any other nominations for vice chair? All right. Apparently so. All right, well, seeing there are no other nominations, I'll close nominations, and John, you're now vice chair or elect vice chair. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Do I have to ask public comment on this? I don't think so.
So Paula motion,
Safe side.
I'll do it safe.
Paula motion, and who second? Who wants to second?
I seconded Kevin.
Kevin,
Yeah.
okay.
I'll
Thank you.
second John.
Thank you.
For a motion, I'll move that we appoint Kevin and John as chair and vice chair.
I think we've already got
I
the
got it.
first and the second.
Yeah.
Thank you anyway. Appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
All right, any public comment on this? All right, not seeing any, just to be safe. All right, now we move on to call for nominations and elect members to serve on the Measure X Audit Subcommittee. As we discussed earlier, they have a new charge to work on formatting of the report And so that means we're going to accelerate the meeting schedule and probably have to meet within the next couple of weeks to get this kicked off in order to make your February deadline, Teresa. So traditionally, it is the chair and the vice chair and 3 other members of this committee. And the past chair, excuse me, so 2 other members of this committee also to serve on that. So Kevin, John and I would serve on that committee this year. Anybody else like to volunteer themselves? You do have to be a primary, unfortunately, to do that. Cannot be an alternate, sorry. Anybody else?
Secondary.
All right, well, then the 3 of us are gonna make some pretty hefty decisions here.
Will these be Zoom or in person?
Probably at least one in person.
I think we have to do at least one in person, but we can do others by Zoom. I think we did hybrid one time too, I think this, if I remember right.
I don't think I can come to in person for the next 2 months, so it'll leave me out.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. All right, anybody else?
Is there a reason the alternates can't be on committee, subcommittee? I don't see why not.
I have to go to the bylaws. and
I was
check.
gonna
Hold
say,
on.
I think it
Hold
was
on.
in the bylaws that it had to be primary, if I remember right, but. We'll look that up.
But both the primary and the alternate are expected to be here or participate either by Zoom or in person. So they should be up to speed.
Well, while he's doing that, I think,
Believe it or not, here it says in the bylaws, in order to encourage maximum transparency and participation by the committee, there shall be no standing committees. Ad hoc subcommittees may be formed, but only upon consultation with TMC staff and legal counsel, and only for periods of less than 6 months. So I guess we're not actually, we're an ad hoc subcommittee. We got to make sure that we have that listed there.
okay,
Let me see if there's anything else
That's good
related
to
to
know.
I think that's the only thing it says for committees.
That would certainly lead one to believe that
We're free.
alternates can join committee.
Yeah, doesn't make any sense.
It says the chairperson shall preside over all committee meetings, may vote on matters, appoint subcommittees, and call special meetings. I don't see any limitations here in the bylaws.
Okay,
So I think you're free.
all right, then alternates.
Nominate Ed Mitchell.
I appreciate that. I really do. I'm getting on a plane to go to Hawaii. I'm gonna be gone here in a couple days. I won't be able to do the work and I can't. I don't know that I can zoom in.
Okay. All right.
I'll tell you what, because we're going to be under the Brown Act, you'll have the agenda in advance with the materials.
Yeah,
And there's nothing wrong with you submitting comments as a committee member for discussion. And we'll take those into account.
Yeah, I work with Teresa and be able to.
yeah,
Yes.
Why not?
okay, so we have a committee of Kevin, John, and myself so far, so is there a motion to approve that appointment for the now technically ad hoc committee of the subcommittee? I'm sorry, Greg, second, thank you, Diane. All right, all in favor, please say, oh, I should ask, public comment? No, okay, close public comment, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll get to work. So Kevin and I and John will coordinate some dates where we can have our first meeting in person. I'm assuming we can do it at TMC offices or. Okay. All right, yeah, very good. Announcements and or comments. Any comments from committee members? Anything you would like to announce at this point? Anybody online? Any public? All right, then we are scheduled to adjourn. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, February 18th at 2 o'clock and probably in this room. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay, easy enough. All right. Before we do adjourn, I just want to say thank you very much for the trust you placed in me for the last 2 years as your chair. I think we've done some very good work so far, and I think we have some good work coming ahead of us, but I always hold this committee and the oversight work that we do here up as an example of how well this system works. And I think Teresa, you do a great job leading us and providing us with all the right information. Thank you to TAMSI staff for all your support that you've given us, and particularly me in the last couple of years, so we appreciate that. Yes, Tom.
I notice all labor folks are gone. There's 3 of them, not one here. Do we know why?
I think Rod is retired.
He hasn't officially
He
told
hasn't
me, but I think
officially.
it's pending.
Yeah,
And I tell you, it was a pain in the ass to drive over here last month and not have enough to have a meeting.
I agree, and
Yep.
and again, I want to apologize because it was last minute. We thought we had a
Yeah.
forum. And we had a lot of last minute cancellations as people were on the road trying to get here.
It's a half a day turnaround,
Yeah.
wasted from the work.
yeah,
Absolutely.
no, we realize that.
Yeah.
Sorry about the effort there.
Right,
Really appreciate your standing and doing that.
yeah, and I think they had a conflicting meeting, which is why some of those folks are not here today.
Oh, okay.
I'd just like to thank you for your work.
Yes,
It's done a great job.
outstanding.
You've been a wonderful chairman.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. It's been my pleasure. We'll hand it off to capable hands here. Thank you, Kevin.
Looking forward to it.
All right, we will adjourn at 3:31.
What's the next meeting date again?
Sorry.
February 18th.
I guess I probably should.